Hi everyone, I'm insanely excited because I have a huge treat for you. I have Laurent Linn from Simon & Schuster. And Laurent's only speaking for himself alone here. He's not speaking on behalf of Simon & Schuster. So Laurent, can you speak a little about your own path in becoming an art director?
Well, I've always been an illustrator, actually. I've always drawn. And I love to create my own work and to have my own vision, but I also love to collaborate and work with other people on creating something for kids. And I actually started out with puppetry, and I was a puppet builder and puppeteer. And then I worked for Jim Henson and the Muppets as a puppet designer and puppet builder. And I was there for 11 years, and I worked on some films, but mainly Sesame Street. And I had different positions over the time there, but it was always about character storytelling. I would design and build the puppets, and I was also then became creative director for the Sesame Street Muppets. So I worked on the children's books for Sesame Street, the toys, the games, the Tickle Me Elmo, all that crazy stuff. And photo shoots, but it was always really creating something for kids. And I got the most incredible training in many ways, but especially in character. What is a character and the depths of a character? And then, of course, the storytelling, the writing, and how you bring that to life visually. So when I left the Muppets, then I actually was freelance for a few years. I illustrated and art directed, but I really loved the collaboration. And so that's when I shifted into trade publishing. So I wasn't working with licensed characters anymore. I work on each book that stands alone or a series, but I don't work with TV tie-in characters, those kind of books anymore. I was at Henry Holt, and now I've been at Simon & Schuster for about 5 years, and work on picture books, middle grade novels, and teen novels as well.
Do you have any time for your own artwork still?
For myself, I've illustrated about 7 or 8 books in the past, but I just don't have time anymore, and I don't miss that either. I feel that I get to be very creative at work, and I work on 35 or 40 books at a time, literally, which is kind of astounding. Many of them are teen novels, so I'm really doing the cover and the jacket, um, and some of the type design inside, but it's not as all-consuming as a picture book. But I love it.
How many books a year do you think?
I have to think about that and add it up. I don't know.
It sounds like an awful lot.
It's spread out. It is, but I'm working on books spread out over 3 years when I say that many books at once. Some books that are coming out this fall, and some books that are starting from all the way to spring of 2015. So it's starting the early process for some of those books and everything in between.
Wow. The logistics of tracking it all just seem like, woo, it seems like a lot.
That's why we love our managing editors. They're different from the editor. The managing editor, because as you can tell by the title, they manage the schedules and all the books. Thank goodness for them, because us creative people,
Not
we're
so
not
good.
always the best with the numbers part.
Yes, you're totally right. What do you look for in artist work samples that you get by mail and in portfolios that you see in conferences?
Lots of different things you might imagine. Talent, obviously, someone who's very skilled at their craft as an illustrator. But to me, there are 2 things that set children's book illustration apart from any other kind of illustration. One is storytelling. You really are telling a story. If you're trained as an artist, which most of us, when we go to art school or when we take classes in art, we're taught to create portraits, landscapes, still life, something that stands on its own, one piece that you put in a frame on a wall, perhaps. You have to kind of unthink that way, because when you're creating even an art sample that you're sending out on a postcard or something for your website portfolio, it has to have a storytelling element there. You have to wonder what comes next, what came before, what's going on here. A beautiful portrait can show your technical skills, your artistic skills, but it's not going to show the storytelling. And then the second thing is an emotional connection. You've got to make an emotional connection to the reader. And if you think about picture books, readers aren't actually readers yet. They haven't learned to read. So they get everything through the art that is purely unfiltered, because an adult will be reading the words to them usually. So the storytelling and the emotional connection have to be there. And then also, it sounds obvious, but maybe not, is it has to be appropriate for children's books. It has to be something that we do in picture books. If you have beautiful drawings with storytelling and emotional connection about a day in the life of a grandparent, it's not, unless that grandparent is a child, really. In other words, not adult issues. If you're doing a book about house renovation, for example, or getting a job, actually something like that, unless it deals with the child's world, then it's not going to connect. Unless the house is a character. You can tell by what I'm saying, it's nuanced, but this is why people are taking your class, so they can learn all those nuances.
Yes, today I've been writing an article on literal illustration and conceptual illustration, and how important it is to work with ideas. And then the other thing that I include in the course is a list of children's developmental stages, so what they're doing at different ages, and I think that really helps. There's less of a spread now in ages for children's picture books than there used to be, but there still are some for, older elementary kids. But they're definitely in the minority. These days it's more skewed towards younger kids, and you really need to focus on, and we've talked about in this class, things that kids are interested in, and things that your own inner child are interested in. Not your inner adult, your inner child.
Exactly.
Laurent, in a review of I'm Bored by Michael Ian Black and illustrated by Debbie Ridpath-Ohi, Debbie's illustrations are described as charismatic. Can you tell us why you think they were described this way and how you worked with Debbie on this book?
Well, Debbie is charismatic. And I think perhaps why illustrations were described that way is because her personality comes through in her art. And I think that's true for any illustrator. And if it's not the truth, then, if you're not true to, what I mean by the truth, if you're not honest in your work, then your work isn't speaking the truth. And so often illustrators will see a trend or see that a style or an illustrator that is different from them is successful, so they may try to do that, but that's not who they are. And the way Debbie illustrated this book called I'm Bored, which is hysterical, it's about a little girl who is very bored.
Oh, do you have it there?
I don't. I was looking around. I don't happen to have it here, so sorry. But imagine an adorable little girl, and then a potato comes along, and the potato talks, and the potato says, I'm bored. So the girl is trying to convince the potato that kids are cool, actually. Kids aren't boring, and it goes from there. And it's obviously not based in reality. Her style is a very unrealistic style. But her personality comes through in the art. And she had her portfolio at the SCBWI conference in Los Angeles, and that's how we found her. Mm. And she had never done a picture. She had never illustrated a book before. So it's a great success story that way, too. But we go through many rounds of sketches, but she was very open to collaboration and always had great ideas. And so that's a great example of how being true to yourself in your art and doing what you do best really makes you shine more than if you try to do something that is forced.
Do you have any examples of books that you've worked on here?
I do, actually. I have a couple that are different styles from each other and also different from Debbie Ohi's style.
Excellent.
And one illustrator is Amy June Bates. And Amy June Bates, I worked with her on quite a few books. And this is a book which is called That's What I Do. Mm-hmm. And it's by Jewel, who's the singer. That's Jewel, in case you don't know. But this brings up the idea of celebrity books. What is a celebrity book? I don't consider this a celebrity book, meaning that Jewel is a writer. This book is a lullaby she wrote. It's a song. It's the lyrics from a song, and she writes poetry in her lyrics, and they're beautiful. And so this particular song spoke to us as a perfect for a picture book. And it's very lyrical, as you can imagine, because it's a song. But anyway, Amy June Bates does this beautiful pencil and watercolor style. I'll show you a couple of pieces. And when you're illustrating something that truly is poetry, as this is, then you really can have your own interpretation of the story in many different ways. And this song is basically about its mother singing her love to her child. And I don't know if you can see, this is one illustration. I particularly love the little owls up there. But the way she shows mood, like the emotional connection here, isn't just through the figures, where there is, this is a it's a peaceful moment. There's not a lot of action in this, but it's love. But it's also through the palette and the composition. And of course, this book is for very young kids. So it's meant to be very gentle. This is another wonderful illustration. What she did here, and this is nothing like this is in the song. There are not rabbits in the manuscript and the words, but she brought her own vision to it, where the world is represented by these thorny bushes, and yet the safety is there with the parent. And this is a very simple book, and it could have been illustrated in a much more simple fashion, but she has such rich textures with her watercolors that she brought another level to it, because these books, you do go back again and again and read them over and over and over. And one other book, which is perhaps the book that was my favorite of this past year, which I was very amazing to work on, is I Too Am America, which is Brian Collier, is the phenomenal illustrator. And he is phenomenal in every way. Again, this is a poem, and I chose these two books because, well, this is Langston Hughes's, I Am To America, a classic American poem, because these are great examples of how an illustrator can take something and put his or her own vision into it. The cover was inspired by an interior piece that, I'll show you the interior piece. Basically, he took this and made it about the Pullman porters.
Let me just interrupt you.
Sorry.
We had an interview with Brian earlier in the course, and he shared about this book and the history behind it, which was really fascinating. And he was, and you're right, he's just a beautiful human being that does beautiful work.
So you've already heard a lot of his background of how he approached it. I mean, it says so much about the honesty in the art. And I'm not sure, did he show you certain pieces I might be repeating, but...
And I'll let you know.
This is the first piece he brought in.
Beautiful.
And you can see there's the American flag kind of veiled over the face of this Pullman porter. That's the full spread. And it's so powerful. And so what I was saying before about portraits, landscapes, this is on this spread a portrait. Now, it's also not an art sample he was creating to send in. This is in context in the book. But it's more than a portrait. There's something powerful going on there. This is a Pullman porter in a uniform, African-American serving white people on a train. So there's a whole historical context there that kids are learning about, because that's what the book is about, is teaching where we've come. But with the American flag veiled over his face, that was the inspiration for the cover, which is actually a boy, contemporary boy today, peeling the stripes away, peering through that he too is America. And so the way that Brian works is with collage. And he does paintings, and he cuts them out, and he does collage with the paintings, as well as textures. And you can kind of see there he even took... Now, Brian can get away with this, but he took a newspaper article, and that's him. It's an article in the photo there. But it's very personal work, because he's showing how he has made an impact as well, and how his he wouldn't be here doing this if it wasn't for the people who came before. So I chose those two books because they really do show that there aren't any trends to follow. It's really about being true to yourself, discovering your style, your medium, and what you want to say. And this has a powerful message. But even in a book that is fairly simple about a parent's love for a child, you can still have your vision, put your vision and your what you want to say in the world into your work, and it makes a difference.
It's really true. Have you worked on any really sort of wild style illustrations? I mean, Debbie's is kind of wild, but I'm thinking of Laurent Child, or stuff that's just very loose, or that's very. Do you work with artists like that?
I'd say that Debbie's style for the I'm Bored might be the loosest, because her work is all digital, but she has these wonderful textures that look like wood block, wood cut, and painting textures in there. But it's very, very loose, and I'm Bored, it's four colors basically throughout, and so it's very minimal color, has a very graphic feel to it. But really, any style, we work with any style. It's right for the story and right for the age range too. Some styles like the Brian Collier style, his is much more sophisticated. So for a preschool book, it wouldn't be appropriate. But Debbie's style is just right for a younger child. So if it works, it works.
Yeah, and Debbie's style is also very childlike.
Yes.
Which is, it takes a lot of talent to. Was it Picasso that said something about, wishing he could draw like a child or something?
Mm-hmm.
It's that he's learned all these skills and he wishes he could go back to the skills he had as a child. Laurent, you've worked with some extraordinary artists over the years. Can you describe some of them and what you most appreciated about working with them?
Well, I think there are a few things. One thing that I appreciate, which is I've already spoken to some, is illustrators who are passionate about their work, who bring something unique to it. And another, obviously, I say obviously because it should be obvious, is professionalism. Someone who understands that they are not in this alone, that it's a collaboration. And when an artist is also the one writing the book, and it's the same person, which none of these happen to be that we're talking about today, then it is slightly different. But at the same time, the same the same things that someone brings to the collaboration are there, whether you're writing and illustrating or just illustrating. I shouldn't say just illustrating, or only illustrating. So deadlines, professionalism, being open to collaboration, those are all things that we look for. Sometimes if someone is trained as a fine artist and has had gallery shows, making the shift to illustrating books is very tricky because it is a shared vision. Picture books, if the author and the illustrator are different people, it's 50-50. It is a shared vision. And then, of course, there's the art director's input, there's the editor's input, and there's a reason because, like I said, I work on 35 or 40 books at a time. That's part of my expertise, is knowing how this book can stand out even more. That what's been out there before, what has been done before in this genre or this style, how can we make it different and really stand out and be better? And then, of course, there is a lot of input on the cover design from the marketing people, the sales people, and we really want their input because they know how to get the book out there. And if the book doesn't get out there, no one's going to see it and buy it, and it won't get into the kids' hands who need it. And then another thing that I look for is someone who's brings a joy to what they do, and it's not, because that's what we're creating for kids, and it shouldn't be stressful. And yes, deadlines can be stressful, but often as we know, illustrators work alone. You work in your studio, you're kind of isolated in a vacuum, and so that collaboration is should be a joyful thing, not a stressful thing. It's really two parts of the brain. It's the creative side and the business side that you have to be on top of everything.
This is great. Just two more questions.
Sure.
If someone sends you a dummy with their colour samples of other things, how finished does that dummy need to be? Because I know in the old days it used to be that it could be pretty loose with just a couple of spreads that were really tight and finished. Mm-hmm. But I have a feeling that's really changed.
Not so much, actually. When someone sends in a dummy, and this is for someone who would be writing and illustrating their own book, I imagine.
Yes.
Then, first of all, one thing is that it always goes, I'm sure you'll cover this, but if you're writing, if you're sending in a manuscript for submission, it always goes to an editor or an agent. An art director, if I get a dummy personally, as an art director, I look at it as an art sample because I don't acquire any books, art directors don't acquire the books, and I've been told I'm not allowed to give them to the editors because they are in control of who they want submissions from. But having said that, when you are submitting a dummy, yes, you sketch out the full book, and it doesn't have to be, it can be just Xeroxed or printed out on paper that's stapled together. It doesn't have to be fancy bound, nothing like that. It's a work in progress. You want to make it clear it's a work in progress. So you sketch the whole book, and then, as you said, 2 or 3 pieces should be the full, final color illustration. And the reason for that is because when we haven't worked with you before and don't know your work, we want to be able to see what those sketches are going to look like when they're done. What is your style? How will you interpret the color balance, the light and shadow, all of those things, and the final technique? And I would recommend choosing 3 different emotional states in the book. And 3 different points. If it's a character arc, beginning, middle, end, a journey, I would choose 3 different points of that journey so that we can see, oh, here's how this illustrator would deal with a calm, peaceful moment. Here's how the illustrator would deal with fear or anger or a chase or, that kind of thing. You have to be, and the reason for the sketches, too, is that you don't want to do all the final work for 2 reasons, actually. One is you want to show that it's a work in progress and things are going to be edited and art directed. So it's not, ta-da, here's my book, publish it. Things might change. You might have sketched it out to be 8.5 by 11, but actually the book should be 11 by 8.5, for example. So you'd have to change the art anyway because of the size of the book, etc. It also just shows that for an editor to look at a book and think, wow, it's fully illustrated, how are we going to ask this person to change everything? They've done all of that work. It's much better to keep it loose.
Oh, good. That's really good news. And for my final question, do you have any advice for artists on how to get work in the industry?
I would say that a website is essential. If you're at that point and you're serious about getting out there and looking for jobs, websites are portfolios. Like an actual physical portfolio that you put together. If you go to a conference and you're having a portfolio critique or showing it in a portfolio competition, it's great to have. It's great to have one, but your website really is your portfolio. And so the first thing that any of us do when we see an illustrator sample that we like is we go to the website, see what else they've done. And the way we find out about the website is postcards really are the best. To have a great postcard, have a great sample, full color sample with your website on there and your name. And as long as your website has contact information on it, you don't need to put the contact information on the postcard, although it doesn't hurt to have email on there or a phone number. But it's really a best piece on each side, do on both sides. And I would say send them every 3 or 4 months, a new sample. And if you do work in different styles, you can send a different style different times because one style might not be what someone's looking for, but you might catch that person the next time. But that's the best way to get noticed. And then also groups like, not organizations like SCBWI, but there really isn't anything else like SCBWI, but and I'm assuming everyone will know what that is.
Yes.
It is an amazing organization, and the conferences are great. Like Debbie Oki, for example, who we're talking about, another illustrator. I just was able to make that phone call and tell her about this very exciting, huge picture book that I want her to illustrate. And she's only illustrated one book before,
Well,
and I didn't even know she did that when I called her. So,
what's her name?
and I found her at SCBWI again. There's no one way. It's all of these things and being connected and doing what your students will be doing now with taking your class and really learning, doing their homework and research so that you know how to get out there in a professional way, and then you'll be noticed.
And to target publishers that are appropriate for what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Very good point. One of the best resources on earth is a children's librarian. And if you are if there's certain style that you work in, or if you're writing a book that you are illustrating and want to get published, then if you go to a good children's librarian and say, show me all the books like this is what I'm doing, because then you can see what's out there, first of all, so you aren't derivative and that way, but you can see on what publishers are publishing the kind of book you want to do, so you really can target, because it takes time and money to send out postcards, and you don't want to waste your time and money.
Do you still get a lot of tear sheets, or do you mostly get postcards these days?
Mostly postcards. They're much easier and less expensive. And because of websites, that's what's changed, I think, because the tear sheets, whether it was folded and taped or put in an envelope, aren't as necessary, because if someone has a great sample and then another few months later another great postcard comes, I should say, then the website is kind of like the tear sheet. You immediately get to see all this work right away.
Wow. Wow, but that's a lot hanging on that one image in the postcard.
Yeah, that's true. That's why sending them every few months.
Yes.
Another thing about tear sheets too is anything in an envelope that has to be opened. I know it sounds ridiculous that it doesn't take that much time to open an envelope, but with everybody's busy, I don't mean it just in publishing, all of us, everybody, we're all busy, and there's so much to do all day that, and also with email, we're inundated with email and all this, that if something's in an envelope, it has to be open, someone might put it aside and say, I'll do that, and then I'll collect a few of them and then open them at the same time, where I can focus on it. Postcard I can look at right away and go, oh, this particular piece appeals to me, or I can see this is a good illustrator, this piece isn't as strong as perhaps maybe they have other work. So a lot is writing on that, but that's why sending out more than one is a good idea.
Are we in your home office, or are we at Simon & Schuster?
This is my home office.
I had a
less distractions here to talk to you than the phone calls and the knocks on the door and all of that. So.
Yeah, and it's super playful. I'm looking at all the stuff in the background, and it just looks like a really fun space. Laurent, thank you so much. This was absolutely beautiful, incredibly generous of you, very, very helpful for the students. I learned things that I didn't know, and that's always really, whoa, that's great. Mm-hmm. So thank you again.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you, and I wish everyone luck, and it's so much fun to talk to you.